I came across a very interesting article on The Athletic describing how the Vancouver Canucks could actually trade forward Loui Eriksson, create some cap space in a potential 3-team trade. We'll take a look at the article and explain how this could work coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, I came across a very interesting article that I want to share and discuss with you today to get everybody's thoughts, to see what they think about this proposal that would involve the Vancouver Canucks, Anaheim Ducks, and Ottawa Senators, and a potential big trade amongst the three teams here, which would mainly help the Canucks the most, but it would also have benefits for the other two teams here as well. As we were discussing in a video yesterday about the most difficult contracts to trade, of course, Loui Eriksson's at the top of that list. And after we've seen Calgary and Edmonton complete a trade swapping Lucic for James Neal, many felt that maybe Eriksson was, just not tradable. There wasn't a fit anywhere around the league that for somebody who would really benefit from taking him on, and that maybe Vancouver would be stuck with him, and they'd have to start the season with him on their roster. And, obviously things are not going to be the most comfortable considering all the comments that have been made throughout the summer, especially from Eriksson's side. It could cause tension in the locker room, and obviously it's just probably not the best idea for them to start the year with him on that team if they can help it at all and find a way to move on from him and get him a fresh start. At the same time, the Vancouver Canucks also really need the cap space, and moving on from that contract would be such a big help. So let's dive into the article here. I'll link it down below in the description, but just a reminder that The Athletic does require a subscription. If you have one, you can certainly go read the full article. It's quite long and very, very in-depth, very well explained. If you don't have a subscription, I would consider getting one. You can often get a free trial for like a week or two just to try it out and see what you think, but there's lots of great writers, lots of great content, and it's not overly expensive, so I would consider getting that if you don't have it already. So I'm just going to show you a few excerpts here from the article. We're not going to go through the entire thing because it's really long, but we'll cover the main points of how this trade would work and see what everybody thinks. So let's start here with the first excerpt called Trading Eriksson for an LTIR Contract. Conventional wisdom won't be enough if the Canucks want to move Eriksson. One creative path to pursue is looking for a swap that would see the Canucks take on a rich contract that's on long-term injury reserve. Such a move would require a budget-conscious team that has an LTIR contract to shed as well as cap space. How would this work for both teams? Players that get placed on LTIR don't get counted against the salary cap, so by acquiring someone who won't suit up, Vancouver would create much-needed cap space. For the other team, it's about the actual cash. The best way to explain what I mean is by giving an example. In 2015, the Toronto Maple Leafs were able to shed David Clarkson's albatross contract by swapping it for Nathan Horton, who was on LTIR. Given that Horton was on injured reserve, the Leafs opened up a ton of cap space. For a budget-conscious team like Columbus, meanwhile, they were paying cash for Horton's salary regardless of whether he suited up or not. Rather than pay for a player who wouldn't be in the lineup for them, they thought it'd be better to spend the money on Clarkson, who would at least play, even if it was just on their fourth line. In brackets here, he has reference to the fact that Toronto just recently reacquired that Clarkson contract and how they're kind of in a similar situation that they need to create some cap space, and this was really creative on Kyle Dubas's part to reacquire this contract so that Clarkson and Horton, both in LTIR, basically going to allow the Leafs to spend over $10 million above this current salary cap by having this on their roster. Toronto essentially wanted Horton because he couldn't play and could be put on LTIR to create cap space. Columbus wanted Clarkson because they were spending money either way, and at least they'd get an NHL player who could suit up for them. The options are pretty slim in this vein, but the Canucks can still try applying a similar approach. Enter the Anaheim Ducks with Ryan Kesler. Kessler's already announced he'll miss all of next season with injury, and it's very unlikely he'll ever play in the NHL again. Most big contracts nowadays are insured by 80% if they get put on long-term injury reserve, which means teams only have to pay 20% of the salary. This means that the insurance will cover $16 of the $20 million left on Kesler's contract, leaving the Ducks to only pay $4 million out of their own pocket for Kesler to sit on the sidelines. But it doesn't stop there. If the Canucks are willing to get extra creative, they could try crafting a proposal that would be even more attractive to the Ducks and thus might not require a sweetener. I inquired about the scenario with the heart of the cap site Puckpedia and was actually able to derive the framework of a three-way trade that would be beneficial to all teams involved. Now this is a complex deal, so let me walk you through it to show you how each team would benefit. Starting with the Canucks, they'd immediately throw Kesler on long-term injury reserve, which clears his cap hit. This would leave the Canucks with just Eriksson's retained salary here, in this case, $3 million. So of course, as you can see in the example there, he has the Canucks retaining 50% of Eriksson's contract before being traded to the Ducks. Vancouver then takes on the final year of Mike Condon's contract as a favor to Ottawa, as opposed to adding a sweetener. As such, for this year, the Canucks would create $1.67 million in cap space as well. For the second and third years, they would save $3 million in cap compared to having Eriksson's full contract. So obviously Mike Condon missed most of last season with injury. It's a good possibility he's going to end up on LTIR for the final year of his contract with the Senators. So obviously, basically, how this trade would go is that they would trade Eriksson to Ottawa first, with retaining 50% of the salary. Then Mike Condon's contract goes to Vancouver, and then Eriksson then gets flipped over to the Ducks with some more retained salary from Ottawa, leaving the Ducks only having to pay 30% of Loui Eriksson's actual contract. The Senators benefit from this because while Condon's cap hit is low if buried, he's owed $3 million in actual cash. With Ottawa notorious for pinching pennies, they'd be spending just $1.8 million in total cash for retaining 20% of Eriksson's contract, thus saving $1.2 million for owner Eugene Melnyk. All told, here's the benefit for each team, just to kind of simplify. The Canucks create $1.67 million in cap space for the 19-20 season and $3 million for each of 2021 and 21-22. They don't have to give up any significant sweeteners to move the Eriksson contract. The Ottawa Senators save $1.2 million in actual cash by shedding Mike Condon. The Ducks save $1.3 million in cash and get Eriksson for a reduced $1.8 million cap hit, for which he'll actually suit up and contribute in the bottom six, as opposed to not playing at all in the Kesler situation. So ultimately, the Vancouver Canucks take on contracts like the Maple Leafs did to use for LTIR, thus creating cap space, which is going to allow them more flexibility to get Brock Besser signed and complete their roster. The Anaheim Ducks get a warm body like Eriksson, who, even though he's not overly productive right now, can actually play, as opposed to having Kesler on long-term injury reserve. So they get that benefit. Obviously at a much reduced rate though, so it's still going to save them money. And in Ottawa's case, we know owner Eugene Melnyk has been pinching pennies and been incredibly cheap, trying to find every way he can to save a little bit of money. This takes the Condon contract off their hands. They retain a little bit of Eriksson, and thus they save money that way. And you know Ottawa would be all for saving money. So this very well might be an extremely creative way here for the Canucks to not only get rid of Loui Eriksson, but to create the much needed, necessary cap space they need to sign Besser and complete their season here. Now they could end up making some other moves as well. Obviously the Canucks have brought in a lot of forwards. They could end up, maybe either demoting a player or two, or maybe unloading a small contract or two to create a little extra space there. Wouldn't say that the Canucks are completely done with their offseason outside of signing Besser. When I came across this article, it's something I found very interesting. I wanted to bring up to our community here to see what everybody thinks. Do you think this would be the best way for the Canucks to shed Eriksson? Do you see the benefits for the other teams? And do you think it really makes good sense for all parties involved to seriously talk about this and make sure that they actually consider it? So of course, as always, want to know your thoughts and opinions on this trade proposal down in the comment section, and we can continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. We have daily updates here on all the teams from around the NHL. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.